Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's your indie spotlight for December 25th, 2024, our final recording of the year, I suppose. Uh,
Yes.
and apologies, I know this is coming out late. It's coming out, the Sunday after Christmas. Our DC spotlight was late as well, but it's the holidays and a lot of obligations and family and all that sort of stuff. So, that being said, unlike the DC Spotlight, which you can check out on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom exclamation point, over on YouTube or on the podcast audio feed. Just do a search for the Comic Source on whatever your favorite podcasting app or platform is. But unlike that, it wasn't a huge week for indies, and I really appreciated that. There was a couple of independent publishers that normally we check out their books, like Distillery and Mad Cave, that didn't have any releases. And again, I appreciate that because there's just so much stuff going on this time of year. And the other thing is, it's not just for us. Like we're reviewing these books that came out on Christmas Day. Most shops aren't open on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
It's really hard for the shops to actually get, they're open the following day, but it's really hard for the shops to get their books. I mean, you guys out there, a lot of you probably don't follow this kind of stuff, but those of us close to the industry or in the industry, we know about all the problems that Diamond has had recently. They consolidated a few years ago from three warehouses down to two. Now they're going from two to one because they've lost so much market share. I get it. They've lost so much market share they can't really justify having two distribution hubs. But they did it around the holiday season, not necessarily because they wanted to, but because they were month to month on their lease because they weren't going to sign another long-term lease because they knew they were going to close that warehouse. And then they found out, the landlord found somebody else that wanted to sign a long-term, so they got kicked out. So instead of doing it after the first of the year like they planned, they had to ship all that stuff to this other warehouse that's now their only warehouse. And there was just all kinds of problems. Shipments not showing up at all, not being able to track your shipments. So a lot of comic shops they're kind of in limbo. Like, when are my books going to show up? People are showing up to buy the books. They're not even there. So on top of DC putting out so many books, the final week, 17, the final week of 2024, it's been a struggle for shops to even get their books, on top of the fact that, yeah, a lot of shops aren't going to be open on Christmas Day or weren't open on Christmas Day. They're not going to be open on New Year's Day. So again, I just appreciated that it wasn't a huge week for independents. Now, that being said, there's some fantastic books this week. I was really impressed, especially my book of the week was kind of a no-brainer. And I'm kind of curious as if you all out there joining us and listening will be able to tell, because I'm going to try not to gush too much about it, and I'm not even going to mention which one it is until the end. But I have a feeling it might be kind of obvious, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, Rocky, it's been a heck of a year. What'd you think of this final week of Indies?
It was a great final week of indies. It was just the right amount, between DC. I don't read much Marvel other than the Ultimate lines, but DC, like which you alluded to, it's just a huge number of DC came out in this week. It was nice. It was just the right amount of indies, and I love it. And the Ghost Machine line, we'll be reviewing some of those, and yeah, it was a really it was very enjoyable. Unlike DC, where we had so many comics, I can legitimately say I enjoyed every single indie I read this week. Every one I enjoyed. It was a tough choice for me. Some of the ones I started reading in the middle of a series, so I'm not going to be. I didn't give them to put on the list to talk about because I don't. Because I'm just getting into them, with the exception of Violent Flowers, which I'll be talking about, which I read the previous three issues, but I'm enjoying, like I say, it's a 2024 is such a stellar year for comics, whether we're talking the big two, maybe not so much Marvel, but certainly DC, and the indies just exploded in 2024. So many great comics.
Yeah, we're not purposely trying to badmouth Marvel. Their Ultimate line, as Rocky alluded to, has been fantastic. But the other stuff, it feels a little tired. It feels a little safe, like they're not taking risks. And we've talked before about how they're one of the lowest paying companies now, so they don't get the top tier talent, especially for artists.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think they're kind of suffering for that. So anyway, let's dive into the first book that we're going to talk about in detail here. It's actually from Image, but it's under the Giant Generator imprint, which is Rick Remender's imprint. Now, Rick was on recently along with Paul Azaceta to talk about the upcoming seasons. series coming from Image, also under the Giant Generator imprint. So hope you guys all had a chance to check that out. Tin Can Society, which Rocky and I have both been reading and really enjoying, is under that same imprint. So this one's under that imprint. However, Rick Remender is not part of the creative team at all. But there are a couple of veteran comic creators here. J.G. Jones, who many people will be aware of his cover work. He's does some really fantastic covers, iconic covers that we're all familiar with. But he's actually handling the interiors. He doesn't do a lot of interior work, especially nowadays. But he, along with Phil Brom, are the writers on this. And then J.G. Jones is handling the art. And then we've got letters by Jackie Marzon. And you know, like JG, because his stuff is painted, typically he handles his own colors. You know, he paints it in color. He used to paint it traditionally, and it's why he doesn't have, you know, he's not prolific. He doesn't have like a ton of output. But when you get a chance to look at this art, you'll understand why. I don't know if he's still working traditionally or if he is working digitally these days, but this Dust to Dust series is just really fantastic. It's set during the Dust Bowl. It's set during the Great Depression in Oklahoma, you know, kind of, I don't want to say home of the Dust Bowl. That doesn't sound quite right, but, you know, Oklahoma was kind of at the center of it. There was drought. There was a lot of heat, a lot of that really rich, fertile soil and farmland in the Midwest of the United States literally turned to dust. It was baked by the heat. They had a little bit over-farmed it. You know, this is before there was a lot of agricultural science and knowing how to take care of the land and what have you. So you introduce drought and hot weather and, you know, lack of water and turns to dust. The ground turned to dust. So it was a very depressing time in the United States. Like a lot of farms, a lot of people, family farms were lost. A lot of people were out of work. They were homeless. They were, migrating around, trying to find a place where they could make a living. So in that backdrop is where this Dust to Dust is settled. And it actually starts off and we meet this family who's kind of in that circumstance, right? Like they were sharecroppers, right? So they kind of rent or lease farmland from somebody who actually owns the land, and then, you know, they share the crops with that person and sell them, and that's how they make their money. But unfortunately, because of the drought, they have to abandon their farm. And there's a bit of consternation on the part of the guy that owns the land. He comes across as kind of a jackass. Clearly, the depression is affecting him less because he's so affluent. But he's like, I can't believe these people are pulling up stakes. You know, I didn't figure them to be people that would just give up. But for their point of view, they're like, there's nothing they can do there. They can't get the crops to grow. There's not enough water. The soil's in bad shape. One of their kids, this little baby, is sick, has pneumonia. The other child is very young, but having responsibilities heaped on him, probably like five-year-old boy. There's nothing left for them there. So they're going to, pull up stakes and try to find greener pastures somewhere else. Maybe they can get some migrant farm work in California. That's where a lot of the people from the Midwest headed during this time. Or they'd head to like Georgia to pick or the Carolinas to pick tobacco. So that's kind of how it starts off. Now, the little boy had found some centipedes, which were, considered pests back then because they'd eat a lot of the crops. But what centipedes also do is they eat dead flesh. They're scavengers in that way. So a little bit of foreboding that maybe there's something going on this land that they're not aware of. And we also meet the sheriff, who seems to be a very upright guy. But you can just see the stunning art. You can see the detail. Probably can't see it real well. You're going to have to pick this up for yourself to check it out. And I do recommend you do that. But this color work where everything looks bleached and everything is kind of white and a little bit faded, and it really kind of sells this idea of what the state of affairs was in terms of the environment at that time, with the drought and lack of water, and everything's brown, there's nothing green, there's nothing growing. So in this town, a reporter shows up. She's what's called a runner or a stringer. She just kind of goes out and tries to find stories and then, sells them to the bigger city papers. And she's kind of taking photographs and trying to write a story about what's going on in the Dust Bowl and maybe sell it to like the New York Post or New York Times or something like that. A little bit of flirtation back and forth with the sheriff. And we meet some of the other people from the town, and again, nobody's doing really well. We meet some guys that are kind of troublemakers, and again, it's it's the sheriff that's keeping the peace here. And the other thing that I want to point out that Brom and J.G. Jones do really well in the scripting is the language that they choose. It sounds so authentic, not only for the time period, but also for the part of the country that they're in. Just the terms that are used and everything. Now, both of these guys, they kind of, I think one of them grew up in the South, like in Louisiana somewhere, and the other one grew up in either Oklahoma or Texas. So, kind of familiar, but this is way before, either of them were born. So they definitely did their research. And again, the fantastic artwork, the characterization, the body language, the emotion in the faces. It's wonderful. You get a little bit of a feeling of a slice of life, and it feels very authentic. But the other thing you get is, again, there's these troublemakers. There's this foreboding. There's a storm coming. There's, double meaning when you talk about a storm coming. Like, is it just a storm coming? Is it whatever was buried under that farm that these people just left? That could be, perhaps it's supernatural. Perhaps it's just a murder mystery. We don't really know at this point, but it's so engaging because it feels so authentic, and the artwork just sucks you in. So I was really impressed with this. It was a very compelling read. I was just blown away. I think this might be in terms of interiors, not that I've seen, every single interior book that J.G. Jones has illustrated, but I've seen a few. I've seen quite a few. And to me, this is the best work he's ever done. I mean, the artwork here is just absolutely phenomenal. So I can't wait to see where it heads next. Did you get a chance to read this, Rocky?
I did, and I quite enjoyed it. I first became familiar with J.G. Jones to my memory of when he illustrated the one of the better Wonder Woman stories written by Greg Rucka, Haikisha. It was a hardcover where starring Wonder Woman and Batman. With that, he has an iconic cover with Wonder Woman's boot on Batman's face, and it's really good. He also did a collaboration with Mark Waid called Strange Fruit in 2017, which was excellent, and that took place that took place in 1927. With the Great Flood, and it sort of dealt with what if the central question: what if Superman was black and in the Jim Crow South? And it was, and I think a lot of the drawings, this series reminded me of that artistically. J.G. Jones, I think this is reminiscent of that story in many ways. It just takes place in 1935, but with similar things, with the sort of like the Dust Bowl and just the jobless state of America. This is more into the midst of the Great Depression. This series is particularly great. Some of the double page spreads in this in Dust to Dust are just amazing. There's one double page spread where it's an overview of New Hope as the sheriff Meadows is riding his horse into the town, and this is it's 1935, and it's New Hope, Oklahoma, right? Am I right about Oklahoma?
Yeah.
And it's, of course, it's in less than 10 years, there's probably the horse is likely going to be replaced by more vehicles. So it's right at the turn of the century, and just the symbolism of the town itself called New Hope, right at a time where it sort of the story hints at, and this is in the solicits, so it's not really a spoiler, that there's a serial killer that shows up here, but it's only hinted at in this first issue where one of the boys, his family, is leaving their farm because they can't successfully farm anymore, and the young boy has found some bones. But he doesn't realize they're human bones. And the sheriff, actually, he gives them to the sheriff, and the sheriff is contemplating staring at the bones at one point in the opening issue, and that's amidst. That's along the same time he's met this photojournalist from the big city named Sarah, who basically wants to sort of, like, she's hunting for stories, and of course you just know they're going to get a hell of a story here. You got like the big sort of like the banker who wants to take advantage of all the poor farmers, and he wants to milk them for all, he hates when they leave. The more farmers that leave, they leave without paying their mortgage, and he's all upset. So you got all these. It's really like a snapshot of small town America during a very precarious time in American history, and it's just beautifully illustrated by J.G. Jones, and full props to Phil Brum.
Yep.
Phil Bram. Yeah, he's I don't know exactly how their collaboration worked, but I certainly like the end result.
Yeah, again, highly recommended, everybody. Just really fantastic. Can't wait to see where it goes. And I'm curious if any more color is going to be added. I mean, again, it's almost like the sepia tone, but once in a while we get a splash of color, whether it be somebody's red checkered shirt or the little gold star on the sheriff car, that sort of thing. So we'll definitely see how that all plays out. So, all right. Up next on our list to talk about, it is Geiger. I think what are we up to? Issue number 9 now. I'm actually wearing my Geiger shirt. I don't know if you can't really see it because
Yeah,
it's green.
the green screen. Yeah.
The green screen is like put in my background, but it's wearing my Geiger Ground Zero shirt. Uh, anyway, Geiger continues to be just really fantastic. Written by Jeff Johns. Paul Pelletier handles the majority of the pencils in this issue, except for the last 3 pages that have regular series artist Gary Frank. Andrew Hennessy inks the Paul Pelletier pages, and then we've got John Kalis handling the colors for the Pelletier pages, and Brad Anderson working with Gary Frank. Rob Lee handles the letters throughout. So we know at the end of last issue, the Queen and the new King's forces came to this small town that is in some way protected from the radioactive fallout, just based on where it is geographically, surrounded by mountains in this valley. But they've tracked Geiger down. And one of the things that Geiger discovered while in this town overnight was that the town is burning books. We know how much Tara Geiger loves books. And they're basically trying to hide knowledge from their children. And they say, okay, if the children are curious about things, about the outside world, if we burn books and we deny them knowledge, then they won't know anything outside of our small town. They'll stay in the small town and they'll stay safe. And so that's the thinking. And how ironic that it's extremely small town thinking when when you think of that. Like, let's be isolationists. Let's sort of stick our head in the sand and ignore the outside world, and maybe that'll keep us safe. To my knowledge, that's in history. That's never really worked out for people too well. I don't know. Maybe it's just human nature that we're innately curious and we want to learn about things. And certainly this was the case when I was a kid. If you told me that I wasn't supposed to know something or I wasn't supposed to explore something, that only made me want to do it more. So in a way, I feel like they should be educating their kids and saying, hey, this is the dangers of the outside world. You're going to have to wait till you're a little bit older. It's still not going to be, great, but, at least give them the knowledge, arm them with the knowledge that might help keep them safe rather than just trying to ignore it. So anyway, the issue starts off, there's this gigantic battle between Geiger and the new knights that are attacking, that, want to take out Geiger and use them for use him for their nefarious purposes. They've learned some things along the way. Geiger tries to melt the sword of the king, and he's like, oh, this time it's got titanium and tungsten, and it's not just going to be melted and what have you. So what they worry about, though, is as Geiger is wrapped up in this fight, he sort of loses track of his surroundings. He's not as aware of the surroundings and aware of how he might hurt people. So the one knight that kind of migrated or defected, if you will, over to his side, Nate, tells everybody, hey, get inside, try to protect yourself, what have you. And the majority of the issue is just this fight between Geiger and the knights, and Geiger really loses control. They coat him with the boron dust. We saw the electrician do that previously. We know boron kind of absorbs the radiation, so it shuts off his powers. You coat him with dust, he's not able to have his powers. But Nate is there and uses some water from like a fire truck and sprays the boron dust off. That allows Geiger to power back up. He's really pissed off, and he almost goes like full nuclear in terms of just exploding, which again would put all those kids and everybody else in the town in danger. But he's so ramped up with power, he actually melts through the supposed radiation-proof suit of the king, and does the same thing he did to the prince or the previous king, and scars his face. But I think it goes to the point where he kills him It's not just a hand on the face that scars him. He kills him, and Geiger's so out of control, and you wonder if this is a manifestation of him like letting his power levels get so high. But he's so out of his mind that even when Nate tries to give Geiger back his boron rods that he sticks in his back, the control rods that can bring him back to human form, um, you can see right there in this on this page that Geiger attacks Nate. He's like, die. And Nate's like, no, hits him with the boron rod. Like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And you can see the kids watching on and whatever. And Geiger does eventually calm down after Nate sticks the boron rods in his back. And then obviously the townspeople, they're like, yeah, this is why we didn't really want you guys here. Thanks for finding our kids on the outside world and returning them to us. But, you guys got to go. And Geiger, explains, hey, I thought I was protecting my family for a long time, waiting for the world to become safe again. I didn't want to let them out and teach them how to survive, and that didn't work out too well for me. And you might want to consider that when you are isolating your children. So he's, what I was saying earlier about, hey, you might want to educate these kids rather than just hiding them away. And then we see that Nate and Geiger continue their journey trying to find supposedly there was another glowing man out west that was able to cure himself. So we'll see how that all plays out. And there's a conversation here, and Nate is dying. We know that. So he's not as susceptible to getting sick, or susceptible to being killed by Geiger because he's already dying from radiation. So that's why he makes a good partner. But, they're talking about Geiger having lost control here and what that might mean going forward. So, and then we get a little bit of some vignettes here. We see the Queen. She's pissed off. We see Redcoat. And we're teased with the return of Junkyard Joe, who what's left apparently of the U.S. government is going to send Junkyard Joe out to try to either capture or recruit Geiger for reasons yet we don't know. But one of the things that really struck me for the first time in this series, and I don't know why it necessarily took me so long. Maybe I'm just dumb. Especially consider Gary Frank, like one of his first projects, one of his first books or titles that really got his name on the map and had everybody noticing him was The Incredible Hulk during the Peter David run.
Oh, that's right.
And
Yeah.
he didn't have a really long run. He followed God, what was the guy's name? The one that did Pitt.
Bruce Jones? No.
No, that was much later.
The Pit.
Yeah, Pitt over at
Keith. Sam Keith? No.
Sam Keith did. He did the Max. Oh my God, how can I not remember it? It has a K. Dale Keown. Dale Keown was on Hulk and had a relatively short run. Got super popular. Image recruited him. He jumped over there, and then Gary Frank took over on Superman or on Hulk for quite a while. And that's where he kind of made his name first, and then Liam Sharp followed him. But anyway, I got a real Hulk vibe here, right? With losing control, the madder he gets, the stronger he gets. How he's and my favorite type of Hulk actually are the stories, and maybe this is influenced by the Bill Bixby TV show, where it was him out there, a loner on the road, stopping to help people. Now, Geiger's not completely alone. He has Nate there with him. But he's on the road, he's stopping to help people, and he does have this quote-unquote monster inside him. And we've never seen him lose control. He's always been, relatively in control before. But he got mad in this issue. And we've seen him get mad before. He definitely has a temper. We've seen him get mad before. But this is the first time I got a real Hulk vibe from this issue, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. So I don't know if it's purposeful. I don't know if it's just a coincidence. Obviously, it's not exactly the same. But I really dug this issue. Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here, and we'll see what comes next.
And that's what stood out for me was the moving parts, the epilogue itself. I quite like because as we're also going to see in Redcoat that we're going to talk about this week. I love that. We know that there's something called the Unknown War, which is something that is the Ghost Machine is a big event that they're moving to, that they've teased it. They have the big timeline at the end of every Ghost Machine comic. And just to see Redcoat and to see to see the Junkyard Joe, to see them at the end just is a tease that sort of like whets the appetite, and we're going to get some teases in Redcoat, the next issue of Redcoat that we're going to be reviewing here too. So it's great. I mean, the Ghost Machine is another publishing company, had a fantastic year, and this is just it's funny, we started to review indie comics, and every time there's a Ghost Machine comic that comes out, invariably it's certainly in our top 5. We're reviewing it, so it's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and partly because they just have such fantastic artists that there's, it's a visual medium, and it's almost like they're getting a head start on everybody because their artists are just so talented. So, all right, up next we have a book on Rocky's list. It's Sam and Twitch Case Files. We're up to issue number 9. Plot by Todd McFarlane, script by McFarlane and Jordan Barrell. Art by Thomas Nashlik. FCO Placencia handles the colors, with Sheila Saldana handling the flats, and then longtime McFarlane Productions letterer Tom Orzechowski handles the letters. So I haven't read any of these Case Files books. I have them. I've been buying them all because I love Sam and Twitch, but I have not had time to read them yet. But anyway, a new case begins. So this is part 1 of this new case. Take it away, Rocky.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I like about it, and surprise, surprise, I don't collect this series. I've been reading them digitally off and on, and the fantastic thing about Sam and Twitch is that you can do that because these are all, most of them, if they're not self-contained stories, they're like 1 or 2 or almost like 3 issues long, and they're really easy to get. They're really easy to get into. And Sam and Twitch, they're a detective team. They know each other so well. And they each have their own little quirks about them. And one of the quirks about Twitch, they're Sam and Twitch. Twitch is the skinny one. Sam is sort of like the fatter. But for those people who aren't familiar with Sam and Twitch, but might be familiar with the Batman universe, Sam is more like the Harvey Bullock, the heavier set detective, sarcastic smartass, and Twitch is the more introspective one, skinny one. He looks very disarming, but he's got one particular skill set that he's amazing at. He never misses. He doesn't look intimidating. He looks like a emancipated, skinny Commissioner Gordon, but he's really good with a gun. And what makes this issue interesting is he ends up. It starts off, and this is what so many of the issues have, because I read the previous 2 issues before I read this one. It starts off, you're right in the middle of the action. He's got his gun set on sort of like a punk who's threatening to kill a woman, and he knows he's been tracking the guy. He's finally tracked him down, and the guy tries to escape, and he takes out his gun, he aims it, and you're pretty sure he's going to incapacitate him. He's aiming for this person's shoulder, but he ends up shooting the guy right through the back of the head, and it comes out his right eye. And there's an investigation because it's a police shooting that resulted in a death, and Twitch he's just beside himself. And he's just, because number one, he can't believe he missed. And he not only missed, it ended up with this guy being killed. And anyways, as the investigation is ongoing, what really nails a couple of things. First thing I want to talk about is the lettering. The lettering, this is I don't often see this kind of lettering where we don't get word balloons. We just get, the way the lettering is, it's just basically just typed words with zigzag lines, and it seems to work. It seems to heighten the detective-like, investigative-like atmosphere and the tone and effect of this story, and it really hammers it home. Sam and Twitch they professionally respect each other, but Twitch has a good relationship with his wife, but he's got some issues with his wife. They had she wants to take the family on a trip to Hawaii, and of course he doesn't feel they can afford it. And so there's a little bit of family arguing and maybe a little bit of dysfunction there. But Twitch, he's got a wife that loves him, and he's a good cop. He's a good man, and he's very frank when he's talking to the police psychologist. Of course, it's mandatory. You're a cop involved in a shooting, so there's some tropes here, but it works so well because of the character work and because of the kudos to the artist here. Thomas Nachlik's art is absolutely it's amazing because it really pulls you into the character, and you really feel Twitch's struggle to figure out, how could that happen? And he's really doubting himself, and it's bothering him more than he lets on. And of course, the saving grace, I guess, for Twitch, although he's not aware of this by the end, is that Sam discovers, because Sam wants to look out for his partner, Sam discovers that, in fact, this individual that he shot was apparently dead before he was shot, which we as the reader, we know doesn't make any sense because this individual is still alive. But the forensics, the autopsy reveals that this person that had died, that he had shot through the eye, was apparently had already had a cardiac arrest and was technically dead before he was shot, and so that is sort of ends on that mystery. But getting there is just, it's it's a character journey, and you get a snapshot in the life of Twitch. And what's so impressive to me is that the last time I read an issue of Sam and Twitch was probably years ago. And I just read 3 issues today, this and the previous 2 issues. And I feel like I know these cops, and I was not a Sam and Twitch collector. I don't have a bunch of Sam and Twitch comics. I'm a lifelong comic book reader, but I feel like I know this cop already, and all from primarily this issue 9. It's a fantastic jumping on point. Every issue is relatively self-contained. It's very well done. Art is excellent. Very high recommendation from me. Did you happen to read this by chance?
No, I haven't. The only Sam and Twitch that I've read, so obviously they showed up in Spawn, and yeah, especially the early issues, they're in there a lot, and so I definitely feel like I know them. They are extremely important to the first 100 issues of Spawn, I would say. And I have read some of the first in doing the Spawn Daily, which I hope to get back to in 2025, everybody. I've read a lot of the previous Sam and Twitch series, and one thing I'll note is that interesting lettering style that you're talking about. That's consistent. That has always existed in Sam and Twitch comics. I don't know what it must have been. The initial letterer or designer decided that it would look good, and McFarlane probably loves it for this type of story, and said, okay, whenever we do comics that are Sam and Twitch case files or whatever, we're always going to do the lettering like that. And you're right, it does work. And yeah, they are. They're very interesting characters. They're very compelling characters. They have a way of humanizing each other, even though they can be at times a little bit tropey, like you mentioned. I think they're fantastic characters. So, all right. Up next, from Ghost Machine, we have Redcoat. This is issue number 8. Maybe one of my favorite Ghost Machine title. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, Rook is so good. Obviously, Geiger's very good. It's so hard. All the Ghost Machine titles are so great. It's really hard to pick a favorite. But anyway, Redcoat issue number 9. Written by Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch are credited as the creators. So obviously Hitch is handling the art duties. I'd say Johns is probably handling the scripting. Obviously they're both working on the plotting or story or what have you. Brad Anderson on colors, Rob Lee on letters. This is an interesting one. So it starts off, we're in 1873. We know that Redcoat is immortal. And this is the first time that it really struck me that Redcoat, Simon Peer as a character, because he's immortal, you can tell any kind of story with this guy. And this one is there's not a lot to it, but it's very much in the horror vein. We meet this guy, and this is not uncommon what he does here. He's writing. It starts raining. It's late at night. He knocks on the door of a home. He says, "Hey, do you have a room for the night?" And they say, "Yeah, sure, no problem. We're going to feed him." And then they attack him and rob him while he's eating his dinner, and they throw him into the cellar. There's like a pit. There's like that's dug out, basement, whatever you want to call it, dug out under the house. And that's how these people sort of make their living. These are evil people, because they throw them down there, and there's a pile of bodies. And then who shows up next? It seems like it's the same night. Not 100% clear, but it might be, although it's not raining any longer. But Simon Pure, and they do the same thing to Simon. Well, we know that's not exactly going to go well for them, because Simon's going to resurrect, and of course he puts up quite the fight, because he does. Although he's not like Superman or what have you, he is kind of stronger than the average guy. He's got, his constitution is a little bit stronger, and he's lived so long, he's learned some skills, but they do eventually kill him. They rob him. They take his coat. He doesn't really have any money or what have you, but they take what he does have. He resurrects. He's on this pile of bodies, and this is what shows that these people aren't just doing this to make a living, and it's a matter of survival or whatever. There's children down there. They're just killing because they like to kill, as a family. And it's really horrific. And like I said, very evil. So obviously Simon comes back to life. We see these horrible people get their comeuppance, and Simon ends up killing all of them, and taking the time to eat their food and sew up his coat before he hits the road. And then I don't know, maybe he alerts the authorities or what have you, because we do see this scene here where all the powers that be are basically excavating all the bodies that were there. And it's not quite clear what Simon Pure does to all the bodies of the family, because they're not amongst the dead that they find, and it's intimated here that they think the family may have run off or what have you, but we know that they didn't, that Simon took care of them permanently. And then we get a little tease that the Northerner, who's a character that is part of the Unnamed, the team of the Unnamed, which we haven't learned that much about. Like, were they trying to stop the Unnamed War? Are they something that came after? Because we know there's time travel and just very long-lived individuals like Simon Pure that are part of it. So yeah, but obviously he fought for the North in the Civil War, and that's why he's known as the Northerner. But we know very, very little about him. But it's nice to see him show up, because it goes back to what you were saying about the epilogue in Geiger, where there's all this mystery that is being laid out very slowly. So looking forward to learning more about him and seeing him show up more. But we get a little tease that up next is Johnny Appleseed. And we've got this introducing Appleseed preview for issue number 9, which comes out next month. And at New York Comic Con, one last thing here. At New York Comic Con this last year at the Ghost Machine panel, both Brian Hitch and Jeff Johns mentioned Johnny Appleseed coming up, and him being a really good character, a fun character, a good friend of Simon Pure. And so I'm really curious to read more and learn more about Johnny Appleseed, because it sounds like they had a blast telling the Johnny Appleseed story. So
yeah. One of the highest compliments I can give Redcoat as a series is how it, we often use the cliche, we talk about the hero's journey. Well, of course, Redcoat himself, he doesn't think of himself as a hero, and frankly, he's a very unlikely one. But his journey, you get we get it in fits and starts. I mean, last issue we have him, speaking to his good friend Albert Einstein on Albert Einstein's deathbed, and we got insights into some character growth on Redcoat and what happened to him in the past, but just hints at it. Last issue we got hints that something significantly may have happened in 1909. Here we have this story that you very aptly recounted that takes place in 1873, where even after him taking care, doing business with this horrible family and taking them out because he has to, because they're a bunch of serial killers. He gets rid of the family and their bodies. He tries to tell himself that he was unattached, he was unaffected and unmotivated by any of their deaths, so of the people that were killed. But he's in denial. He doesn't want to admit, even in 1873, that he says, I don't have the need for vengeance because I only care about myself. We know that Simon Pierre's not always going to be that way, that eventually he's going to be affected. He's going to want to express vengeance, and it's hinted that might take place in 1909 in the future. So it's fascinating that we get hints of of arcs that his character might go through, but we don't know exactly what he'll go through. And it's a very, very interesting way and fascinating way to tell this story. And to add to that, as you said, any story can be told with Simon Pierre, because of the nature of who he is and the nature of his origins. So it's just a great concept. And this is my favorite Ghost Machine title. So yeah, it's well deserved.
Yeah, it's really fantastic, and Brian Hitch he does such a fantastic job. It's
amazing.
It's a sort of a simple story in a lot of ways, in terms of, it's much less complicated than the first story arc we got with Benedict Arnold and what have you. It's pretty straightforward here. You have these serial killers, this family that, what's the saying? The family that slays together stays together.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have this family. They're preying on people, on travelers especially. So not a lot to it. Definitely horrific, definitely evil, or what have you. But you add in the action scenes that Hitch does. You add in these full page spreads here. Like this is such a fantastic scene. This full page splash that opens the book, that gives us the date and immediately sets the tone. Like you can almost hear the narration, the voiceover on a dark and dreary night in 1873 as, the rain falls and everything. And you got the spooky music going on. I mean, it just sets the atmosphere and the tone so well. So yeah, just a fantastic job, from Brian Hitch. All right. Up next, we have a book on your list. It's called Violent Flowers. We are up to issue number 4 on this one. I'm not familiar with it at all. I don't know anything about it, so take it away.
Well, this is
actually,
the final issue.
Sorry, Rocky. Before I do that, I should mention that the story and art are by Maria Lovett, and then the lettering. In fact, she does it all. Lettering, logo, and design are also by Maria Lovett. So, yeah, she's a one-woman show apparently.
Yeah, she's a one-woman show, and she actually gained more, in my view. She gained more mainstream prominence where she did the art with Brian Azzarello on a series called Faithless. It was very provocative, very, very erotically charged comic book. It even had like sort of X-rated, like secret covers and what have you. Her art really is amazing. In Violent Flowers here, this is actually a vampire tale. It's 4 issues long. It's part of a larger arc, a larger narrative. This is a universe that she's created for herself. It's creator owned. And think of a very erotically driven Anne Rice, a series of, if Anne Rice novels were more erotically charged and were comic books instead of books, this is what it would be. Now, Maria Lovett, in the past, she came out a couple of weeks, or about 3 or 4 months ago. She did another one shot from Image called All the Things We Didn't Do Last Night, which was about a couple of lovers that sort of meet in Paris. It was a one shot, very, again, sort of like a interesting Harlequin romance, but with a harder edge to it. And I've always sort of collected her, mainly because I buy her for her art. I've always wanted her to get better as a writer, because quite frankly, I think that she was sort of learning the ropes. And in any event, this is actually one where I thought was very good. Now, you can, for those watching on Comic Source Podcast YouTube channel, her art speaks for itself. It's amazing, and she's particularly good at drawing that sort of erotic, and good at combining erotica with action and violence, and that's perfect for a vampire series. The series is really about a vampire named Cornelia who's been a vampire for hundreds of years, but has refused to turn anybody because she just doesn't believe in it. She allows herself to grow old, even though she doesn't have to. She's acquired many friends and lovers through her time as a vampire. and one of them by the name of Urzabot ends up betraying their own and ends up being sort of permanently imprisoned by the vampire queen by being sort of forcefully drowned in the ocean, and she suffers the death of 1,000 deaths by constantly being resurrected and drowning in the water. And she eventually escapes, and she wants revenge. And over these 4 issues, it's one long sort of epic series of action scenes and scenes of erotica, and it's very well done, and it has a story to it, and it may not be for everybody, but if you're into vampires and of course you like art, this is actually something that I think I collect Penthouse Comics, and just a shout out to Penthouse Comics, by the way, that came out. Penthouse Comics is actually surprisingly adult orientated, but not necessarily all erotica. If you read the stories in Penthouse Comics, they're actually very adult, very good, but it's not, I would not call it pornographic at all. It's just more erotic. This is in that vein. It's very adult, very well done. I think Mary Lovett is getting better and better as a writer. And I would encourage people to pick this up because next you can pick it up as a trade. You could probably pick up these first 4 issues. You're not going to be disappointed. The covers are fantastic. There's variant covers. You can take your pick. And there's a story here to be told, and she's gotten better as a writer, and it's something where I think she's only going to continue to get better, and for people to keep an eye on Maria Lovett, because we're definitely going to be seeing more of her in the future, I predict.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was vampires. I kind of got that feel from the cover that it might be, but when I read the solicit for issue 4, it wasn't. It didn't explicitly say yes. This is vampires. So, yeah, pretty interesting. All right. Up next from me, we have Violator. We are up to issue number 4 on Violator. As always, it's written by, or all the issues so far, they're all being written by Mark Andreyko, but there's a different artist on each issue. And really, it's the art here by Gian-Errico Bonacorsi that really, really blew me away. I mean, right from the first page, I mean, just look at the detail there.
Wow.
Yeah, for anybody who is not familiar with the series, basically this is the origin of the Violator. And really, that was kind of covered in like the first issue. We know he was an angel at one point, and he's become a fallen angel, and based on his betrayal and trying to play both sides in the heaven and hell war, he's sort of ostracized. Neither side really wants him. He becomes physically mutated. That's why he looks like what he looks like, because he used to look like an angel. Which they look human in terms of their form, 2 arms, 2 legs. Look normal. I suppose he has 2 arms, 2 legs now, but yeah, he definitely doesn't look human, if you will. So he's been struggling to survive and kind of scavenging. He's already kind of learned how to take on human form, although he doesn't have quite the same ability to appear human that he'll have later. He perfects that over time, because you can sort of see he's wearing this human skin here. But you can see around the eyes. His eyes don't look human. They look like the insect eyes that we're familiar with the Violator having. But you can even see some of the rest of his normal skin sort of poking out right around the eyes there. So again, just a fantastic job illustrating this by Bonacorsi. So as he travels in Russia, and he's cold. I mean, obviously he's not as affected by the elements as you or I might be, but he's still not in good shape when we meet him here. And so he happens upon Rasputin, the Rasputin from Russian history, as he's doing what he did, right? A very depraved individual. So you probably get a kick out of this, Rocky. It's in a church, and the Rasputin's having a good time with the ladies, if you will.
I see that.
Yeah, and so the Violator's there, and he's trying to get the lay of the land and what have you, and some of the male townsfolk attack Rasputin. Obviously, they're not happy that he's doing what he's doing with their women, and the Violator takes advantage of this situation. And what he ends up doing, because Rasputin, for whatever reason, we're not told that he's especially blessed or whatever, but he has talents with the ladies, but he also has physical talents or whatever. He wouldn't have gotten to where he got if he didn't. But what ends up happening is Violator kills Rasputin and takes his body, takes his skin as his next form, if you will. And so it's kind of intimated that the reason, all these legends of Rasputin and all the despicable things he did or what have you, it wasn't just it was Rasputin that's, had that reputation and started down that path, but really it was the fact that the Violator, for the majority of his adult life, it was the Violator in Rasputin's form that did all these horrible things. He was a confidant of Tsar Nicola and what have you, and saved his son from what was it, like tuberculosis or
That's right.
hemophilia. That's what it was. And we see how that happens here. We see that he goes to the castle or what have you, and he ends up feeding his demonic blood to Tsar Nicholas's son, and that's the way that he cures him of the hemophilia. But what that does is it basically turns his the Tsar's son into kind of a demon spawn in a way. So it's just I thought it was a really interesting story. The Violator series for me, it's been a little up and down. Some of the issues have been better than others. The art has been fantastic regardless of who's done it. And there haven't been any bad stories or bad issues, but not all of them have been memorable. Some of them have just been kind of like, all right, yeah, it's just, the Violator's journey toward showing up in Spawn number 2, I think, where he shows up the first time. But they haven't been particularly interesting. This one's very interesting because it ties in almost to like an alternate history of Rasputin, and the art by Bella Corsi is just, it's so good. It's so good. So if you want to check out some fantastic art, if you're fan of the Violator, you're a fan of kind of the world of Spawn and what have you, and want to get an idea of just how depraved and despicable the Violator is, I definitely would recommend checking this out. And we can see here the results of the Tsar's son being fed the demonic blood. It basically corrupts the son to the point where Satan is basically able to manifest through him, and that's what ultimately causes the Violator to abandon his identity as Rasputin, because Lucifer shows up and says, "Hey, you've been doing these horrible things. Maybe it's time for to come work for me." And Violator's not ready. We know eventually he ends up working for Malbolgia, but here he's still trying to quote unquote be his own man. And so he ends up just fleeing and abandoning the identity of Rasputin. And you can see here where they find the empty skin, the empty shell of Rasputin's body, and we see the Violator is just taking the body of this old woman. But you can already see how much he's learned. Like, you just look at this last panel, and she does a much better job. There's not the bagginess around the eyes, so he learned a lot as Rasputin. So definitely fits in with the horror feel of the Spawn universe. But mostly I wanted to talk about it just for that gorgeous art. I mean, as soon as I saw that first page, because I've been reading all of the Violator issues, but I don't always cover them on the Independent Spotlight. But as soon as I saw this page, I was like, oh, I got to talk about this book. This art is fantastic. And I don't know that I'd ever seen Gian-Errico Bonacorsi art before. I mean, with a name like that, you figure he must be an Italian artist, but I was just blown away by this artwork. I thought it was so good, so fantastic. So
yeah, it looks good. Yeah. I have to check that out. I've got to read that. I wish I had more time to read more, but yeah. It looks amazing. The art, it really does, and I love history, and I love that Rasputin. It actually reminds me of a comic book I read called Rasputin a couple years ago, or 5-6 years ago. But in any event, yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Was that Avatar? It sounds like something Avatar would do.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't remember the actual name of the series, but it was actually pretty good. I think maybe it was Image, but I'll remember it. I'll remember it when we're done. Murphy's Law.
All right, up next, last book we're going to talk about in detail today. It's Hornsby and Halo. We're up to issue number 2. This is from storytellers Peter J. Tomasi and Peter Snyberg. I know I'm saying that wrong. I think I think it's Blue Sky. He even has on his Blue Sky profile how to pronounce his last name, and I'm
Yeah.
still. Anyway, I'll know for sure next time. I'll look it up ahead of
Yeah.
time. But anyway, they're the storytellers. Obviously, Peter handling more of the writing, and Peter Tomasi handling more of the writing, and Peter Snyberg handling more of the art duties. We've got John Kalis on colors, and then Rob Lee on letters, continuing to tell the story of Hornsby and Halo. And for those not familiar, this whole idea of one of them was an angel and one of them's a devil, and they've been given to these families on Earth. Hornsby being given to the family on Earth that's a little more on the angelic side. They tend to do the right thing. And Halo given to the family. They own a funeral parlor, and they're constantly doing despicable things, like they bury people in like their jewelry and whatever, and then have these people dig them up later and rob them and steal, and they're just awful people. So it's a little bit of that, like, is it nature or nurture? The whole idea is it nature or nurture that makes us good or bad? And this idea that the reason that heaven and hell have done this is to try to broker a peace, right? Not unlike what happened in DC Comics lore with Mr. Miracle Scott Free, the son of Highfather, going to Darkseid, going to Apocalypse, and Orion, the son of Darkseid, going to New Genesis to be the son of Highfather. Or you have two opposing factions and they, marry a son and a daughter to try to unite the kingdoms or what have you. So, that's the story. And in the first issue, both of these young children, they're right around 12, 13 years old at this point. They both manifest powers based on their heritage, and it surprises them because they're not aware of their identities. And maybe they're starting to learn, and it could add complications to their, already complicated lives. Dealing with their parents who they don't necessarily agree with because, again, the angels with the bad people and the devils with the good people. And so we see that here, the grave robbers, I guess is what we'll call them. And Hornsby ended up with all the jewelry or what have you. And even though she knows it's wrong based on what her parents would want for her, you see that she's covetous, and she took the jewelry and, she's wearing it, and she loves it, and she ends up going and selling it to a pawnbroker for like $3,000. But meanwhile, we see that the forces of evil have sent these Hell Riders into town. And we're not exactly sure why, and I didn't pick up on it if we know why. But we see a little bit of the nurture kind of show up, like the influence of the nurture, because even though Hornsby is a devil and quote unquote bad at heart, if you will, based on her nature, she offers the $3,000 that she got in a very selfless act, right? I mean, say it's, stolen proceeds, so it's no skin off her back, but she didn't have to do that. But she offers it to these Hell Riders to leave. And, they don't appear to be demons to Hornsby or Halo. They just look like, a biker gang. So that was really interesting. But what we find is that they actually can see Hornsby as her true form, as the little devil, as you can see there. So then there's some action with Halo showing up and fighting against the Hell Riders and kind of banishing them or what have you.
Yeah.
But
you're not on the screen, by the way. It's not on the screen.
I'm not on the screen, and I'm talking about this the whole time. Let's go back.
Sorry,
yeah. Go back to the beginning here. But what's so interesting about it is that with these riders showing up, you can see here where Hornsby was taking a look at the jewelry she was wearing, and then we see her dog, which may be like sort of the surveillance, if you will. She has a dog. Halo has a cat. I think maybe those are how they keep track, how, heaven and hell keep track of them, watch them or what have you. But yeah, then we see her go and sell the stuff at the pawn shop, get the money like I was talking about. And then the Hell Riders show up. She offers them the money to leave. And then Halo becomes aware of the Hell Riders as well. But what's interesting is that based on these Hellriders showing up and some other entities that we see that are sort of keeping track, like there's this old guy with the glasses that gives her some advice and then disappears. This is all of a sudden a much bigger story than I had anticipated. I thought it was just going to be the story of these two young kids. I'll put that in quotes because one's an angel, one's a demon. But it's clear that it's a much bigger story than that. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know that I wanted it to be a bigger story. You know, I thought this was. I mean, Peter J. Tomasi. A lot of people love him for his Super Sons run, which is, in a way, you could argue, sort of a predecessor of this, right? If you want to consider John Kent the angel and Damian Wayne the demon, you know, like the nature versus nurture, and then what are their parents, parentage, with obviously Superman being sort of a stand-in for heaven, and then Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul is a stand-in for hell or evil. So it's interesting. Again, you have the nature versus nurture, but it's clear this is going to be something that's much larger than that. So really, really interesting. And we're teased with the Ungrateful Dead coming up next in the issue number 3. And also, I'll call out Peter Snyberg's art because I just think it's fantastically suited for the story that's being told. I want to be clear that even though this is angels and demons, there's no blood and guts, there's no foul language, there's nothing, depraved or anything like that. It definitely suits in or fits in with kind of the all ages feel of something like Super Sons. So if you have a younger reader, you definitely could read this along with them or gift this to them as something for them to check out. So.
Yeah, I agree. I would add that the young man, Zachary Halo, who was, of course, he's the angel. You talked about the nature versus nurture. I love there's a scene. There's at one point in the story there's an earthquake in the small town, and the way Zachary is, he's in the house and there's an earthquake and he's looking for his parents. He wants to make sure, he wants to get them outside to make sure they're okay. And his parents are already outside and they don't even care about him. They called him from outside and he's in the house and they're saying, is it still safe to come back inside? I mean, their instinct wasn't even to save their own son, just to really magnify just how much they don't care. And you can contrast the way that to the way Hornsby's parents, the mother, her first concern was getting the children out of the house, the safety, what have you. Peter Tomasi is doing a really good job here of showing that nature v nurture and how it is having an impact, like you said, on the nature of these characters that represent the best and the worst, the angel and the demon, and how the power of the environment, of how we're raised, really can have some impact on a person's nature. And that's a particular note because we got hell, and there are factions of hell and heaven that hate this forced peace on them. Part of this cosmic peace that was created by having Zachary Halo and Rose Hornsby sort of separated and then taken away and raised by families that were of different natures than them. And the peace is supposed to be honored. And we got this adjudicator character that is on Gaia Earth to make sure that this peace is maintained. But there are factions that are against that, represented by the biker gang and the Infernals and what have you. And Peter Tomasi's weaving a complex tale here, and I like it. I think this is really good, and I'm really curious to see where he goes with this. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to see in issue 3, because to me that's the most interesting part, the fact that it's a much larger story than we had been told, and that this teaser image for issue number 3 on sale in January looks really fantastic. So can't wait to check that out. All right, so up next, let me give a quick rundown on some of the other independent titles that are out this week that you might want to be on the lookout for. I almost talked about Void Rivals. It is, part of the Energon universe. It's actually the first book in the Energon universe that debuted. But it's, and this is not a criticism necessarily of that book, but it's very much a Robert Kirkman written book. And what I mean by this is the same thing with that I found with Walking Dead. Like I find when I read it, I always want more. It doesn't you don't get a big chunk of story in each individual issue. And so it with uh with Walking Dead, what I would do is I'd wait like 4 months and then I'd read all four issues to feel like I got a big chunk of story. I haven't wanted to do that with Void Rivals. I've been keeping up on it, but then when I read each individual issue, I just don't feel like a lot happens. So, but it is still a good book, and in terms of the Energon universe, it's probably my favorite book. And because I've said this before, as much as I'm enjoying Transformers and GI Joe, um, I sort of know what to expect. I mean, Transformers are going to fight against the Decepticons, Autobots against the Decepticons, and GI Joe's Cobra versus GI Joe. With Void Rivals, I mean, I just don't know who's going to show up, where, or why, or whatever. It has a little bit more of a surprise factor, so I am enjoying it. But anyway, issue 15 of Void Rivals is out this week. We've got Rogue Sun out, issue number 24 from Ryan Parrott. That's in the Massiverse. I'm a couple issues behind on that. It's the reason I didn't talk about it, but it is one of the books that I do read on a consistent basis. Also, Rat City number 9. Speaking of, we talked about a few different Spawn Universe books this week, so that's out. We also have The Autumn Kingdom from Oni Press. And that's been a pretty popular title that I hear a lot of people talking about. It's Cullen Bunn, who did a ton of work over at Marvel at one point, did a bunch of work at DC as well. So that's his book over at Oni. And there's also some multiple printings, like Transformers gets a 10th print this week. Rocket Fellers,
Wow.
if you missed the first issue of Rocket Fellers, it's got a second print. Um, and I think that's it. So yeah, quite a few good indies out this week, like I mentioned. All right. Well, Rocky, do you have a choice for book of the week?
Uh, Man, I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna give it to Halo and Hornsby. I'm gonna give it to them. I enjoyed everything I read this week, but Halo and Hornsby, I was on the tipping point. But hearing you talk about it and reminding me of the uh, just how well Tomasi has done the nature and nurture. It's just a really good story, and maybe it's because I still long for Super Sons, and part of me longs for that. This is much better than Super Sons already. It's so much better, and the character work is great, and it just hints at a larger narrative. It hints at a larger mythology that I really want to get into this universe created by Peter Tomasi. It's really good. So I'm gonna go with that. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like every book this week that we talked about was really good. I mean, notwithstanding the ones that I didn't read, the Salmon Twitch and the Violent Flowers, but every other book that I read was really good, and it is sort of deserving of book of the week, and I would recommend. That's not always the case. We do the DC Spotlight. I'm like, yeah, it's you have a book of the week, and I have other good books, but can't say I would recommend every DC title that I read, but I'd recommend every one of these books. But that being said, they're all on the same level for me in terms of entertainment value. I'd probably give them all like a solid 8 out of 10, except for one. There's one that I would probably give it probably 9 out of 10, maybe even 9.5, and that's Dust to Dust. I just thought
Really good.
yeah, I just thought it stood head and shoulders above the rest, for all the reasons that we talked about when we reviewed it. The art was fantastic, the vocabulary, the scripting, the pacing, the art, both the line and the color work were just fantastic. It felt so authentic. I was just super, super impressed. Like I heard or read an article when this was, and I can't remember where I got my information about it, but I saw J.G. Jones talking about it. And just the way that he was talking about it, it put it on my radar. I knew I wanted to check it out when the time came. And yeah, as soon as I got the chance, as soon as the preview copy came in, I read it and I was just blown away. I reached out to J.G. Jones. I was hoping to have him on to talk about it. I haven't heard back, but I get it. Everybody's busy with the holidays or what have you. So hopefully maybe before issue number 2 or maybe after the trade or whatever. But I hope to have him and Phil Brom on to talk about it at one point because it's just fantastic. It's such a great book. So yeah, it was an easy pick for me this week. But again, I would recommend every one of the books that we talked about. I thought they were all great this week. So all right, well that's going to do it, everybody, for our final episode of 2024. I can't believe it. This year just flew by. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time. We hope you all enjoyed the 12 Days of the Comic Source and had a chance to listen to those. If you only listened to one, you'll probably make it the Scott Snyder or Jeremy Adams. But if you listen to two, then listen to our comic talk on Christmas as well. You know, not that I think you guys want to hear our opinions over hearing Scott Snyder talk about the craft of making comics or Jeremy Adams' excitement and what's coming with Green Lantern and Aquaman. But man, I really enjoyed our Christmas time. I'm almost like, man, we just might have to do that every year. I'll just shift. You know, I know it was a disappointment for some people that Tom King wasn't able to make it like he was supposed to for our Christmas Day episode. But yeah, we had a fantastic time just talking comics and what's coming up with the Superman movie.
That was
and
good.
have you and we got a good response from viewers and listeners for that Christmas episode. So glad you guys all enjoyed it. And on that note, don't forget to head over to Rocky's channel, Comic Space Bloom ! Where we do our DC spotlights every week. Ring the notification bell, like, subscribe, do all that stuff that helps us continue to do what we do. And also be sure to leave comments, and we love to get conversations going in the comment section of our various videos. So as far as the Comic Source goes, if you're checking us out on YouTube, again, like, subscribe, so you're sure not to miss any Comic Source content that comes out on YouTube. If you prefer to listen audio only, again, the Comic Source podcast is available on all all podcast platforms and apps. So just do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe. All right, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Again, apologies with it being late with the holiday season and what have you. Hopefully the New Year's Day stuff will be out on time, but we'll see. It may be a few days late as well, just based on scheduling and that sort of stuff. But come the following week, when we're back on the regular schedule, sure we'll be fine going forward. So that's going to do it. Appreciate it as always, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.